Okay. Next thing we're talking about here is the VLOOKUP. This is something that eludes a lot of people, but a lot of people are also very familiar with it. So what a VLOOKUP is, if you've not heard of it before, is a way to be able to look up information that is in your current data set from a separate data set. So for example, in this case, if I wanted to, I could look up the full name of the Nobel laureate and say, I want to know what subject did they get it in and which year did they get that Nobel Prize in. So the way I would do that is I have a data set over here that shows me who was the Nobel winner and a Nobel Prize winner, what subject and what year, and I want to populate that information into here next to these guys. So there's a couple different ways I could do it, right? The first way is I could say, okay, I've got this guy and there's no way I'm going to pronounce that name correctly, but I've got this person. I could go over here and look and say, okay, I've got, here he is or she is, and they got it in chemistry, and I'm going to copy and paste that over here. And I could do that for every single one in this list, but that would be a very tedious thing. And so instead, what I want to do is I want to look up automatically the full name of this person, find it in this list, and tell me what is next to it. And that's what VLOOKUP does. So the way you structure a VLOOKUP query, similar to the substitution formula, we're going to put an equal sign, and then I'm going to put VLOOKUP. And usually it will autocomplete for you as you start to type. So it can do that. And then after that, it's saying, okay, first thing is, what is the lookup value? This is asking me, what is it that I'm trying to look up? So I'm trying to look up the name, the full name of the Nobel Prize winner. So I'm going to click on that. And then it's saying, what is the table array? Meaning, where do I look this up from? So in this case, I've got it right here next to my original data. But you could have it in a separate Excel file or on a separate tab. It doesn't matter. Wherever you are that you have that information is where you would go to, and then you would just go and select, highlight the entire data set for yourself. Okay, so now I've highlighted that. Now I'm going to put a comma, and then it's saying column index number. So if you think of this data set as having columns, so I've got column 1, column 2, and column 3, they want to know which field do you want to return? Well, I want to return the subject, which in this case is in column 2. So I'm going to put the number 2. And then there's this range lookup value. And almost always, I would say that you want to put in false. In this case, it's an optional value, but I always put in false because it gives you an exact match. Otherwise, it has some other algorithm that it matches by. So I'm going to put in false and hit enter, now that my formula is complete. And there you go. Now it's looked up that Robert Koch over here got his Nobel Prize in medicine. And I can validate that by going over here, and I can see that yes, in fact, it was in medicine. The other thing that we might want to do is you want to make sure that this data stays rigid. So for example, if I were to copy this formula down, what it does, unfortunately, is that it shifted my table down, right? So if I look at this one right here, it's highlighted all the way from row 1 down to, what is that, row 52 or 51. But instead, I want to have it stay on row 1 to 51. And so the way I'm going to do that is you can use dollar signs. And dollar signs basically make this from a dynamic reference to a fixed reference. And what I mean by that is it will not change as you go down. So for example, if I put a dollar sign in front of B, then that means that even if I were to copy this formula to the right, it will maintain that reference for me, right? So it's still pointing to B, but over here, you can see that it shifted it to the right. So I don't want it to shift it to the right. So now let's put the dollar signs also in front of H and J. And now when I copy it to the right, you can see that it kept it in place horizontally. I want to do the same thing for the vertical. So if I copy this down and keep going down, whoops, then you can see that it's starting to shift my table down as I copy the formula down. So I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put dollar signs in front of the row indicators as well. And now when I do that and copy it down, it's going to keep the same table reference all the way through. So now I can copy this formula into all of these cells, and you can see that it populated everywhere. The other thing I want to do is here, I've got subjects, but instead I wanted to have the year because this is the year column. And so I can go into my formula, and where I'm referencing column number 2, which was subject, I'm going to change it to column number 3. And when I do that, now I'm going to get my year back instead of my subject. Okay,